Welcome to Happy Homes and Gardens. I'm your host. My name is Daphne Royse. I am a real estate broker, architecture, and interior designer. EarthGrid offers a revolutionary tunnel and excavation solutions that uses plasma touch technology to repair our infrastructure for a better power grid. Let's welcome Troy Helming, who will explain more of what EarthGrid does. Hello.
Hi, Daphne. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so you want me to share a little bit about EarthGrid, or where do you want to go from here?
Yeah, well, I want you to tell us who you are and how did you start EarthGrid?
Okay, yeah, so I'm a serial entrepreneur. EarthGrid is company number 8 for me. I've had 1 failure and 6 exits. Almost all of my companies have been in infrastructure. Actually, no, all of them have been in infrastructure, and almost all have been in clean energy. So solar farms, wind farms, a biodiesel plant, things like that. But I started EarthGrid in 2016, and I started it because one of our solar farms had to be downsized by 75%. So, it was only 25%, only a quarter as big as we wanted it to be. And it was because we couldn't affordably connect to the grid by going underground through under 3 creeks and protected wetlands. It was in California. And the permit would have taken 2 years, and the project contract would have died. And the cost to bore underneath was crazy high. It was almost as costly as building the whole solar farm. So anyway, we were drowning our tears over beers at a happy hour in San Francisco. And one of my solar engineers was bragging to his girlfriend about how when he was a Navy SEAL on his SEAL team, they would practice entering enemy ships underwater by cutting through the side of the ship with a plasma cutting torch. He's like, yeah, it's 20,000 degrees. Take your arm off. We're all like, dude, that's so amazing. Anyway, middle of the night, I pop out of bed. I'm like, 20,000 degrees. Can that go through rock? Maybe that could lower the cost of boring tunnels underground to put power lines underground. And I couldn't stop thinking about the idea. So anyway, I formed the company, built my first prototype in 2017. And here we are today with a machine that's making money and customer contracts signed. But that's the origin of EarthGrid.
Is it really rise to 20,000 degree?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we create essentially like a miniature sun, a tiny little sun. It's plasma. Plasma is not new. It's been around for decades. There's plasma cutting torches that are used in all kinds of manufacturing processes. But we essentially create lightning in a tube with electricity. So our inputs are air, which is free, and electricity, which usually comes from the grid and often from solar or wind farms if we can sign contracts that way, or directly from the solar or wind farm in some cases. Anyway, but we pass air over that kind of lightning, and it superheats the air to anywhere from 6,000 to 27,000 degrees Celsius.
Wow. So solar and wind farm, but do you do anything with the geothermal?
We have 3 geothermal companies that have signed letters of intent with us. So yeah, we think we can be helpful for that as well.
Can you talk about what is a certificate of public convenience and necessity, and why do some states not require it?
Well, it's not required per se, but it's something that we have gotten. It's a CPCN, which stands for Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, like you said. And what it means is that we are a regulated telecommunications utility, and we are now, approved as a utility in 46 states, which represents about 97% of the U.S. population and GDP. Simply means just like AT&T, Crown Castle, Verizon, American Tower, and other telecommunications companies, just means that we now get access to the public rights of way, meaning alongside any road in any of those 46 states, we can put our tunnels or trenches to bury power lines or water, fiber, freight tubes to move freight with robots, those kinds of things.
And what is EarthGrid's goal, and how can they resolve our power problems?
So our goal is aligned with what I've been doing for most of my career. I am the author of the book, The Clean Power Revolution. Please, if any of the listeners don't buy it, it'll put you right to sleep. But I wrote it about 20 years ago, and I talk about how we need 270 new transmission lines to convert North America to 100% renewable energy, solar, wind, batteries, things like that, geothermal and other renewable sources. And it would save a huge amount of money and obviously make cleaner air, cleaner water. Our food would be cleaner because it wouldn't have mercury in it and stuff like that, which comes out of coal plant stacks, smokestacks. But anyway, so EarthGrid is one of our primary goals is to accelerate the clean power revolution. So we actually just signed a contract last week to build 16 tunnel projects across North America and Canada. Actually, one of them in Europe, so I guess 15 in North America. And those tunnel projects are going to have power, fiber, and water in all of them, and in some cases, freight tubes. And we will be adding over 100 gigawatts of new, clean, low-cost renewable energy to the grid. Because right now, 80%, 4 out of 5 solar and wind projects don't get built. They never get built, and that's because of our antiquated electrical grid. There's not enough transmission capacity to move solar and wind power from sunny and windy areas to our cities and our factories and our data centers. Anyway, so we're solving that problem because we can put an underground transmission line in 1 or 2 years. And let me ask a question, Daphne. If you had to guess, how long do you think it would take for a new transmission line to be built in the United States? On average, how long do you think it typically takes?
I want to guess 18 to 24 months.
It's actually much longer. The average is about 15 to 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah, because nobody wants it and everybody fights it, and there's legal challenge after legal challenge after legal challenge. And if there's one landowner or one community along the way that says no, kills the whole project. So most of them die, or they go through years and years and years of litigation. If it's underground, nobody really cares, right? And in fact, if it's underground along public rights of way, it's very hard for anybody to stop it. And why would they want to, right? Because we need cleaner energy, cleaner air, cleaner water.
I'm so off. And
No, you're average. And most people have no idea that it takes that long. And that most overhead transmission line projects never get built because they get killed along the way by NIMBYs and bananas, if you've heard of those acronyms.
my curiosity, would that reduce our cost of utility?
Absolutely. Yeah, solar and wind are the cheapest form of new energy generation. In fact, building a new solar farm or a new wind farm is cheaper than letting an existing nuclear or coal or gas plant operate. So it's actually more affordable and will save all of us as ratepayers money if we build more solar and wind and retire more coal and gas plants more quickly. And that's happening. In fact, so far this year, approximately 85% of all new power plants are solar, wind, or battery plants. And there's been dozens of power plants retired. Even when Trump was in office, there were more coal plants retired when Trump was in office than any other president. And in Biden's term, also a bunch of coal plants have been retired. And it's not because people don't like the dirty air or the dirty water. I mean, nobody does. But the primary reason is economics. Coal plants and nuclear plants just cannot compete on price with wind or solar, and natural gas is kind of in the middle. It's still competitive in a lot of areas, but it's still more expensive in most places than solar or wind.
What if we bury our utility on the ground? How hard is to do repair and add new services if everything is on the ground?
Yeah, well, it would have been hard doing it that way if they were underground, if we did it the way it was done 20 years ago. Because 20 years ago, it would be direct buried, meaning they would dig a ditch and just put the cable in there, right? And then if somebody was building a swimming pool and they accidentally clip the cable, power goes out to the whole neighborhood or whatever. That's not done anymore. It's almost always put in what's called a duct bank with strong conduits around it. But in EarthGrid's case, we plan to go deeper and build big tunnels, 2.5 meters in diameter. That's 8 feet for people in America. I'm an American, but we're the only country on the planet that doesn't use the metric system. Anyway, and so it's big enough for people to walk around inside. So it's very easy to visually inspect the lines or do maintenance But even if it were in a trench and conduit, it's still easy now because you just pull the old wire out and pull a new one in. So that's not really an issue. And I will say that you don't have to take my word for it. Look up the stats. Like, for example, there's a nonprofit called the Power Delivery Intelligence Initiative, or PDI squared.org, PDI2.org. And they have a bunch of studies on this. A lot of US utility data is out, and the average underground lines on average are 9 to 15 times more reliable than overhead lines.
Is that work for all different terrains? And how far down in the earth that you build your tunnels?
We can bore through anything, and typically we want to be about 3 to 5 meters below the grade. So that's 10 or 15 feet. And that gets us below the spaghetti of everything else that's already there.
Okay. Go back to technology. What is plasma tunnel boring robot?
So yeah, a plasma tunnel boring robot is essentially a robot that looks like a small tractor about the size of a riding lawnmower that has, think of it like lightsabers on the front that are shooting out these plasma plumes. And, it's so hot that the thermal temperature causes the rock to spallate, which was a new term for me. I'm not a geologist, but that means the rock breaks up into like sand or little bits of like gravel. So it causes the rock to either spallate or melt if there's a lot of silica in the rock. So we're creating man-made lava or magma. And the third thing that happens is some of the rock will vaporize, and then it cools and condenses into very fine silt. So we use an off-the-shelf mining vacuum to extract the spoils. We're not using water or toxic chemicals like all the other, horizontal directional drilling, tunnel boring machines. They use drilling mud, bentonite, lubricants, chemicals, and that stuff's pretty nasty, and they have to pay a lot of money to, suck it back out of the ground and then truck it away to dispose of it at a certified treatment plant that can accept that nasty stuff. We don't have any of that. And so we use a mining vacuum that can pull a car-sized pile of gravel up to 8 kilometers at a time. And we can actually sell our spoils. The gravel can be used in road base, and the sand and silt can be used in concrete manufacturing.
Okay. And landscaping, maybe?
Yeah, for sure. Landscaping too. Yeah, great point.
How about natural disasters like earthquake or flood? Would it impact your network of tunnels underground?
That's a great question. It could if it's not designed properly. So on the earthquake side of things, our tunneling engineering firms, and we're working with some of the largest engineering firms in the world that have been building tunnels using conventional methods for decades. Because we're non-contact, we're not vibrating the rock and creating a lot of micro fractures all over the place. And in some cases, we're actually annealing the rock as we go because that hot temperature can create, a glassification type thing if there's silica in the rock. But then we also line it with reinforced concrete. We have a robotic system that does that too. We didn't invent that. That's just one of our vendors, but we do have lots of patents that are published globally and all that. But anyway, so in an earthquake-prone seismic area, it would be reinforced. And think about an earthquake. Think about it like a tidal wave. If there's a tidal wave on the ocean, would you rather be on a cruise ship trying to run away from the tidal wave, or would you rather be in a submarine?
Probably submarine, right?
Exactly. Yeah, historically, earthquakes do very little damage to subway tunnels and other underground infrastructure because those are often in harder rock. The damage happens with buildings that are up, as the waves propagate up from the earth, it gets more powerful the closer to the surface they get. So anyway, so that's that part. And then flooding is very common in tunnels. You just have your standard dewatering techniques, very powerful pumps that would, dewater the system in those kinds of areas.
I guess you will not impact by the fire, correct?
Correct. And in fact, that's one of the reasons I'm glad you brought it up. A lot of the wildfires in California, Canada, Oregon, Colorado, Washington. In fact, the biggest fire in Texas recently was caused by overhead power lines. Most of the big fires are caused by overhead power lines. So we need to bury these things to literally save lives. And yeah, underground lines are not affected by fires that might be overhead, and they certainly wouldn't cause a fire.
You say it takes about 10 to 15 years before this can be built. Can you build everywhere in the country, or you're limited to coastal city areas, or some rural area will be okay to build underground tunnels?
Well, so it does not take us 15 years to build. It takes everybody else 15 years to build if they're going to put the power line overhead. That's what takes 15 years. If we go underground, it can be done in maybe 15 months. In some cases, even less, depending on the permitting time. In California, it's about a 12-month process, same in Maryland and New York and a few other states. In a lot of the Midwestern states, we can get our permits within days and start construction, within days after that. So it can be very, very fast. And we can do it really anywhere where we're a utility, which is, like I said earlier, 46 states. The only 2 states in the lower 48 that we don't have yet are Missouri and Arkansas, and we'll probably apply for those fairly soon.
Okay. What are your challenges regarding to regulation and restrictions from different cities and counties, maybe states?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's typically the hardest part about doing any infrastructure is getting the permits and getting the rights of way. And so in our case, those are one and the same. Because we're a regulated utility, if we apply for a longitudinal right-of-way permit alongside a public road, because we're a utility, it's a streamlined process, right? And so whoever controls that road would be the leading authority that would have jurisdiction over that stretch of road. So it might be a state road or a county or a city road, one of those three. And each of them would have a different permitting process, and it's all over the map. It's fragmented. It's not an easy answer. There's not a one size fits all. Each jurisdiction has their own process you go through, but they're all similar. They need to see the engineering drawings of what the tunnel looks like. If it's in a seismic zone, they need to have, stamped engineering drawings for that, for the tunnel lining technique. So we go through that process, and we've done it already. We've completed a couple of projects already in California, which is one of the hardest places to get a permit. Went through the whole environmental engineering and the California Environmental Quality Act. So if we can permit our projects in California, we believe we can permit them everywhere else.
Do you have any conflicts for current existing, for example, like gas line or cable lines on the ground?
Oh, it's a big problem nationwide. What you're talking about is called line strikes, and it happens all the time. And it takes down whatever it is. It causes all kinds of disruption and economic cost. Because our plan is to go deeper, that is probably solving about 80% of the problem, but it's not enough. We can't just go deeper and hope for the best. So we've actually identified, and we're now working with 2 companies that have a suite of sensors. In one case, it's 30 different sensors, and we do a scan of the ground, and it can peer down close to 100 meters, the length of a football, more than a football field long, and see anything underground that's made out of metal or plastic. We won't be able to see really old, like clay or brick pipes. That'll just, look like dirt or rock or whatever. But it'll see if there's any caves or karsts or natural gas or water, pockets or anything like that. So we'll do that beforehand. We'll go deeper to avoid most everything. And then we also have onboard sensors on the robot itself. So as we're going in situ, it's doing that same sensing to make sure. So far, knock on wood, we haven't had any issues, and we think with this mitigation measure, we'll be okay.
How much infrastructure will we need to meet 2035 deadlines for electric cars and appliances?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a bunch of studies that have been done on this, but the electrification of everything that you're talking about, people are replacing their natural gas stoves because it's like, the same as having a smoker in the room with you. And my wife, for example, has asthma. She used to have to use her inhaler every time we would cook. Now she doesn't have to, because we replaced it with an induction stove from GE that's incredibly fast, way fast, like 3 times faster to boil a kettle of water for my tea than the old gas stove was. So it's faster and it's more accurate and no pollution. People are doing that all over. They're replacing heating, driving electric, et cetera, et cetera. Some people say that it's going to require doubling or tripling of the capacity of our electric grid to be able to handle the electrification of everything. And that was before the massive increased electrical demand of AI and the NVIDIA chips that are being used for AI. So maybe it's going to be a 3x to 4x, maybe even 5x increase. We know we're going to need a lot of new infrastructure, and not just power. Our water systems are failing in many communities around the country. Sewer, stormwater systems need to be upgraded, and in some cases they have sewer and stormwater that are combined, and some cities have never separated them. So every time there's a storm, sewer is mixing with stormwater and running into our rivers. You know, it's a big problem. We have a lot of infrastructure we need to upgrade. Oh, and fiber. Only 40% of Americans have access to decent broadband. That's a big problem.
40%? That seems
Yes.
low.
It is. It's very low. And the way the government defines it, the FCC defines it as having at least two choices for high-speed data. I believe it's 300 megabits per second down and 100 up, if I remember correctly. But anyway, the government's definition, it's only 40%.
Where are your majority servicing areas in the country right now?
So far, our projects have been confined to California, the ones we've completed. However, we've signed agreements and we have pending contracts for projects all over, including Texas, Virginia, North Carolina, Michigan, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, and several other places. Oh, and we've also signed an MOU with the government of Iceland to do projects there.
Iceland's great. I've been there, and I believe that their hot water and electricity are free for the residents.
It's very cheap. I'm not sure. Yeah, it might be free. I don't know. But yeah, it's one of the few countries in the world that is 100% powered by renewable energy, mainly because of the geothermal. They also have some solar and I believe wind. But yeah, I've been there too. I was there last fall and met with over 40 people from government and the utilities and big construction companies that are all struggling to tunnel through the very hard basalt, the volcanic rock there.
You have won the Startup World Cup Silicon Valley region competition, and that's how we met there.
That's
How
right.
do you feel about it? And are you ready for the final competition?
So yes, I believe I'm ready. I've actually given the pitch for EarthGrid over 2,000 times, so I've had a little bit of practice. How do I feel about it? I'm humbled and honored by the judges and also my fellow competitors. There were 16 companies that pitched at the Silicon Valley chapter. Very tough competition, some amazing companies, and so I'm just again I'm humbled by it. And I believe it's just a testament to the amazing work that my team has been doing here at EarthGrid. We've accomplished so much in a short period of time on not a whole lot of capital. We've been pretty scrappy, and I have to give all the credit to my team.
Well, you were probably one of the best speakers. I have to say
Oh,
that.
oh, thank you, Daphne. I'm very grateful.
Can you share some past startup success stories with us?
Sure. Okay, so I'll share, let's see, Tradewind Energy. I started Tradewind in, gosh, 1996, a long time ago. And at the time, although I'm a third generation Bay Area Californian, at the time I was living in Kansas City. My folks moved me there when I was younger, even though both my parents also grew up in California. But so I started the first wind farm company in Kansas. It was originally Kansas Wind Power, and then the name was changed to Tradewind Energy. And I sold most of my shares in 2004, but by 2017, it became the largest wind developer in the United States. And in 2018, I believe it was number 2 or number 3. Today, it is a $35 billion division of Enel Green Power. Enel is a huge multinational utility company based in Italy, and they're active in the US with solar and wind. And my former company is the biggest part of their portfolio. So I'm pretty proud of that.
Are you still working on that, or that's in the past?
No, that's in the past. I do still sit on the board of a handful of clean energy companies, Pristine Sun, which is another company that my wife and I co-founded together. And it has built over 350 solar projects, mostly community solar farms out in fields like, 10 to 100 acres. And we sell the power to utilities. So I sit on the board of that company and a couple of other companies in solar and wind.
Why do you choose to do clean energy as your career?
So I actually grew up in a solar powered home. In 1980, my dad built his dream home in Kansas City, where it gets pretty cold in the winter and pretty hot in the summer. And the solar system was solar thermal. It's not what we see today, which is solar PV that converts sunlight to electricity. Ours was solar hot water system, but it heated, of course, the water in our house. It also heated the pool and the hot tub. And in the wintertime, we would shut the pool down, and the 30 solar panels on the shed behind the house also heated our air. We had 4 furnaces. It was a big house, 7,500 square feet. And so it would preheat the air in these copper coils. And one of my chores as a kid growing up was to maintain the solar hot water system. So I was exposed to this at a very early age. My dad politically is very conservative. My mom is liberal, and so I guess I'm kind of in the middle. I am in the middle. I'm unaffiliated, not registered with any party, and I follow whoever's going to support renewable energy. That's who I support. But anyway, but my dad did it primarily to save money. He was like, hey, I want to be, saving money. I don't want to be paying for natural gas all the time because it's very volatile. Price of natural gas, is extremely volatile. And number 2, he wanted to be energy independent. He's like, if there's ever a disruption in the gas supply or whatever, I want to make sure that our house is always going to be warm in the winter. So that formed my belief system as a child. I also heard my parents complaining about the oil shocks, and the frustration that they and their friends and family friends would always complain about our dependence on foreign oil. And so that shaped me. And so I've always felt passionate about clean energy. But when I got out of business school, there were no jobs in solar or wind or anything. And so I went to work for AT&T and then left to start my own telecommunications infrastructure company. And then I sold that to start Kansas Wind Power, the first wind energy company in Kansas.
I wonder if there's any more homes built like your parents in the rural areas, because lots of places doesn't have public utilities available.
There are, and in fact, there's one state here in the United States where every new home is required to have solar hot water heating systems on it. And there's another state, in fact, maybe more than one, that's required. Every new home has to have solar PV, solar electric systems on the roof. You want to guess which states those are?
Nevada?
So Hawaii requires solar hot water on every new home, and California requires solar electric PV, photovoltaic systems on every new home.
Okay, I'm so off.
Don't feel bad. No, hardly anybody knows the answers to these questions.
I was thinking to guess Arizona because I want to find a sunny state.
Yeah. Well, I wish they would do it in every state, but so far, not yet. And hey, look, it's not something, yes, it makes the home cost a little bit more, but builders have gotten so efficient at doing this now that it's a tiny increase in the cost of the home. But the cost of ownership of the home goes down so much more. It actually makes the home value more because it lowers the cost of ownership.
Okay. You mentioned about copper pipe. Is that similar to the heat pump technology?
That's right. Yeah. So it was a liquid system. It was a combination of water and propylene glycol. And one of my chores was recharging the propylene glycol in the system and changing out the filters and occasionally the pumps, pressure relief valves that would get crusty and nasty. Anyway, so yeah, it circulated with electric pumps, Grundfos pumps. It would circulate the solution through the flat plate copper collectors and then copper pipes from the shed to the main house. And then we had a huge, what was it, a 4,000 gallon water tank in the basement. And it was very well insulated with something like 40 centimeters of insulation on the outside. And that held the water. And the water was often Fahrenheit, what would it be, 180 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, close to 100 degrees Celsius, usually around 90, 95 degrees Celsius. And so that water would then recirculate again, to heat the pool, the hot tub, the air, and the house hot water.
Genius.
It was the first system of its kind in the Kansas City area. So my dad was a bit of a pioneer.
Tell us where your website and how can people contact you?
Sure. People can find me, Troy Helming, on LinkedIn or on any of my social media. It's Solar Ninja Troy. I've also been a competitor on American Ninja Warrior, and I've been in solar for, well, over 40 years if you count the chores when I was a kid. So that's my handle, Solar Ninja Troy. EarthGrid is www.earthgrid.io for input-output.
Thank you very much, Troy. I really appreciate your time and informative interview here.
Thank you, Daphne. It's my pleasure and my honor to be on your show.